female consumer myself, so I'm constantly looking for interesting designs and new products. So ZAOZAO is definitely something that will grab my attention. But we know e-commerce space is very competitive, especially in Asia and also in the States. So what inspired you to quit your job and start this company, ZAOZAO, and what kind of demand or need did you and your co-founder find that has not been fulfilled?
My co-founder and I started ZAOZAO in 2012. She used to be a buyer at Gucci, and prior to that, she was working in fashion, various fashion houses like Oscar de la Renta, Lanvin, Chloe. Myself, I came from a finance background. Well, I don't know if that's correct. I worked at Goldman Sachs, but before that I studied medicine. Anyway, so we both quit our jobs in February 2012 to start this initially because we thought that emerging designers in Asia were not getting enough spotlight. Basically, there's a ton of talent. You have all of these very creative minds that are not being acknowledged, mostly because of either cultural or resources. Everyone in Asia, if you have a tiger mom, you know that they want you to become a lawyer, a doctor, or a banker. So the designers don't get as much attention. Anyway, so we decided to marry the concept of crowdfunding with helping these up-and-coming designers. And we ran that for about 8 months. So initially, the product we're talking about today is completely different. We're a travel-inspired e-commerce site now, but initially we were a crowdfunding site for designers. Fast forward a year, and we pivoted to this travel-inspired discovery commerce site. And the reason we did that was on the back of a couple of key learnings that we can go into later. But basically, we were inspired by travel and by shopping and all the different things that I think this is mostly something that women think about, especially when we travel, is it's about the journey. It's about discovering a very unique piece in a faraway land that has an interesting story. It's not just about looking pretty or finding a product that looks good. It's about the story behind it as well.
So you mentioned about the repositioning of your company, ZAOZAO. Your team did the adjustment because you found something differently about your market, or it's purely because you think that's a better idea, or you change your original goal?
So the reason we turned from crowdfunding fashion in Asia to travel-inspired e-commerce based in New York was on the back of, I would say, 3 lessons. So the first was, one, crowdfunding was so new in Asia at the time. We started in 2012, but in the States, everything kind of happens 2 to 3 years earlier. So Kickstarter had been happening already 2009, 2010. But even in 2012, when we started this, people would ask, oh, this is a great idea. You're crowdfunding emerging designers, so who's funding? And I would say to them, you are. So they just didn't really understand what is the point of committing money before you can actually receive a product. To people in the Asian market, that just didn't make sense. And so part of our customer acquisition strategy at that point was me teaching General Assembly classes in Hong Kong. But customer acquisition is already so hard. Having to educate your customer before getting them in, it just didn't make sense. It was too much work. And so we were a bit early on that, doing crowdfunding in Asia. The second was the emerging designer scene. So while people in the US or in Western markets that are more developed, they appreciate up-and-coming talent, people in Asia don't buy, so Asian people don't buy Asian stuff, basically. You get the ultra luxury, the LVs and Hermes of the world, and then you get the cheapo imitation knockoffs a la Taobao or other sites where you can buy stuff for really inexpensive. And so we were playing in the field that was somewhere in the middle, and the demand was just not there. And on top of that, people didn't understand, why would I pay $100 for a clutch that's made by a designer that lives in the same city as me? Why would I do that? I can just buy something from a cheap night market. And so that sort of leads me to the third point, the third lesson that we learned, which is in this field, or in this business at least, a lot of times you need to earn Western endorsement. You need the endorsement of the West before you can effectively penetrate the Asian market. So one example is when we moved to New York in May of last year, we changed the address of our newsletter to obviously New York, New York with a zip code here. Our monthly subscription rate tripled after that. And when I went back to Hong Kong 6 months later, I went back a couple of times, but each time I went back, I heard anecdotal evidence too. It was just that perception of our company had changed as well. It suddenly was, oh, ZAOZAO, the New York company. Oh, this New York company, they must be doing something right. They must be doing something different, even though literally nothing had changed. It was my partner and I, we were still the same people. It's just on top of, when they see us, I think public perception is you're two Asian girls, therefore you're local and you don't know much about the US market, even though obviously I'm from here and my partner's Singaporean, she grew up all around the world. None of that really matters to people. What matters to them is seeing that New York address.
Cool. And besides understanding your customer, what's the hardest part of building up a fashion site? Logistical or selecting the right products or something else?
Everything is really hard.
Yeah. Mind you elaborate on that? Maybe you're selecting the right product.
So my business partner does all the curation. She actually travels around Asia. So far, we've sourced products from Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan that are on the site and that are live. And I actually just came back from a filming trip in Chiang Mai, Saigon, Kuala Lumpur, Hong Kong, and Singapore. I flew back in last night. So what we're trying to do now is build content around the different cities that we're featuring designers in. And that's difficult because we don't necessarily have the language skills in each of these cities, but what's helpful is that we did both spend time in Asia, and we do have the local connections to help guide us around. So sourcing product is not as hard as, I think, building a customer base.
Got it, yeah. And you mentioned about you have to build a kind of Western image to be successful in Asia, in China, in Hong Kong. But still, the English market is smaller than Chinese market in Asia. So why don't you launch ZAOZAO in Chinese? Obviously, the space is there, the demand is there, and also logistically it's easier to handle, and culturally it's more relevant.
So ZAOZAO right now is only in English, but we're targeting the Western market. So we're not targeting English speakers in Asia, although it's a website, so anyone in the world can buy stuff from us. Our efforts are targeted towards US, Europe, South America. The reason for that is our analytics the numbers show that half of our traffic, or more than half of it, was coming from the West anyway when we were based in Hong Kong. So now that we're based here, it's more like 70-30. So that part's worked. But in terms of entering China, we wanted to be strategic about it. You've seen a lot of companies sort of prematurely go into China and then blow up. So we wanted to align ourselves with the right partners before we went in. That being said, we're actually going to be more accessible to Chinese consumers next month. I can't go on the record yet speaking about it, but we are making changes to enable that.
Great. And you mentioned now ZAOZAO is more a combination of travel, fashion, shopping. So do you think ZAOZAO can go beyond Asian and to add destinations like Paris or maybe New York in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're starting with Asia first, just because that's our domain expertise. That's where we have connections. That's where we spend time, know the languages, know the culture. But definitely, that would be a dream.
Let's talk about money. Do you mind to share, like, how did you meet your investors? Are they angels or VCs or PE? And what's the most challenging part?
In terms of our angel investor composition, they're mostly friends and family. One of them is a friend of a friend, but it's all known entities and people who've basically invested in us for us. In terms of raising capital, we've only really fielded inbound requests. We haven't really tried outbound contacting people. Those conversations usually end pretty quickly because they're investing for obviously different reasons than a friend or someone who, or a family member would.
Great. also, I'm curious, you mentioned you have a medical and banking background. So do you think your background helped you in terms of starting off this new company?
I think from being a lab rat and working on a trading desk, I learned how to be comfortable with numbers, how to do presentations, and how to just pay attention to detail. But I think in terms of the actual skills that have been transferred to being an entrepreneur, when I first moved out to Hong Kong, it was right after I graduated. It was in '09, kind of during the height of the crisis, and I'd accepted an offer at Goldman Sachs. And I was moving to this city where I had no friends, I didn't speak the local language, and I didn't have a relevant degree because I was pre-med in college. And so I went to Hong Kong, and the first thing I did was, in Hong Kong there's, as you probably know, there's an area where all the English speakers gather in Lan Kwai Fong, which is where all the bars and the clubs are. And so I would spend basically 3 or 4 nights out of every week standing outside the clubs with a lighter. I don't smoke, but you're not allowed to smoke inside the club, so people would come outside to take smoke breaks. And so I would light people's cigarettes in exchange for an introduction, and that's how I ended up making friends. And eventually, I moved up the food chain to bouncers and bartenders and eventually managers of the clubs. And so eventually, I was allowed to go inside the club. So the point of me telling you the story is not just that it built character, but I also met some of, I met 2 of my angel investors that way, first of all. And some of the people who have been instrumental to enabling ZAOZAO to get to where it is today have been made through, whether directly or indirectly, through that exercise.
And you mentioned a lot about your partner, who is actually from a fashion background. So do you think she is the perfect partner for you for this business, and why or why not?
Well, yeah, she's definitely the best partner that I could have chosen. I wouldn't have done this business without her.
And what's the most important part of finding the right partner?
I think having someone there to keep you accountable is definitely helpful. We were friends first and foremost, so we had been friends for 3 years. I basically met her 1 or 2 months into moving to Hong Kong. I met her through a friend. I didn't meet her at the club. She doesn't sell. And it's been really nice having someone to go through it with, the ups and the downs. It would be a lot harder to do it alone.
I'm sure there must be a lot of up and down. Could you tell us what's the highest point and what's the lowest?
The highest point and the lowest point came one after the other. I would say the lowest point came first. It was when we decided to pivot, because pivoting at that point, you're basically admitting that you failed and you're going to do something about it. And prior to that, we were in Hong Kong. We just couldn't figure out what was happening. And then when we finally did, we received an offer to join an incubator in New York, which was the reason that we moved here. And so we came here for this trial period of 2 months. We were supposed to go back to Hong Kong after that. But things went so well, we raised money off of that. We got free office space, and now I haven't left New York, so now we're here.
Your partner managed who was doing what, and was there ever a time when you weren't sure whether you would stay together, into the second business, or were you certain that was going to continue?
So we received the offer to join the incubator in New York, and within 24 hours, the offer was made to me since I was on the ground here, but I had a call with my partner, and within 24 hours, we were both in. So with her, it's never been a question. We've always been in this together. And in terms of division of labor, it's been pretty easy, because stuff that I don't know how to do, she does, and stuff that she doesn't know how to do, I do. And if it's stuff that I don't want to do, it's usually because I can't do it or I don't know how to. We've never really fought over, division of tasks, really. That's something that we're pretty fortunate to have.
One more question, which is, where do you want to be in 2 years or 3 years? Not 5, but 2 or 3.
So one of our goals is to become the Anthony Bourdain of fashion, and we'd really like to play up this media angle. And I mentioned before we were on this filming trip, we really want to bring out the featuring the different destinations, because I think that's where we can really add value in terms of this e-commerce business, not just sourcing and curating cool, unique products, but also telling the story behind them and doing it in a creative way that nobody else has done before. So in media, to address your question.
That leads right into my question. Have you thought of creating additional revenue streams by getting tourist organizations, hotels, and venues that are in the locations that the designers live in and work in to create multiple revenue streams?
Absolutely, that's on our to-do list. And also, a lot of people have approached us about whether it's Western businesses trying to go to China or to Asia, or Asian businesses trying to come here. They've approached us for consulting and for just like, where can we go sell our stuff? What's the market landscape like? Things like that. So there are a couple of different opportunities, but we're focused on just building out the media part right now, because I think that will lead to more opportunity.
Have you considered representing some of the new designers that you discover in the Western markets and bringing them here? And it's not going to work.
Push the button all the way.
Only you can use it.
All the way. Push the button.
Have you considered representing some of these designers and bringing them to Western markets like New York, Paris, London?
We've been asked to, for sure. We just haven't decided if that's within the scope of what we want to offer in our services.